Some say he was perhaps one of the first victims of the so-called prospect hype. There was probably a few others that came before him, but really, not a lot of young minor league prospects get compared to Babe Ruth, nor would they want to be. At first, that sounds great. Then you think about it. How can you live up to that? Especially when only a handful have come close. So let's go. After hearing praise like that, being spread around, unless you become an MLB All-Star, anything else would be considered a disappointment. That's even if you did stay in the majors for the rest of your career. He was the same size as Babe Ruth and could hit for power and throw a flat as a pancake fastball in the high 90s, is why some made the comparison. Then hoping he pans out so they can take credit for discovering the next Bambino. When you have a really good all-around talent and can pitch, usually they make you a pitcher. In the case of today's player, they didn't know what position to put him in, so he played everywhere but never honed in on any one spot for any length of time. And even worse, never really taught the basics of both hitting and pitching. In the end, the pitching interfered with his hitting mechanics. This started to get to him mentally, and it took years, 4 years, before Baltimore finally gave up on trying to make him a pitcher. And that's when his career really took off. And at the age of 24, just coming into his own, as they say, he was destined for the majors. He quit, tired of the life. And instead of being fun, Albert Charles Barth, nickname Bert, said it was just a big chore. Born 1938 in St. Louis, Missouri. He is a 6'3", 210-pound righty. MLB debut, never made one. Position? It's quicker if I just tell you the positions he doesn't play. Catcher. The 18-year-old signed with the Baltimore Orioles in 1957 and was a non-roster invitee to their spring training camp. They took a look at the teenager and started him in Class D with the Fitzgerald Orioles, where he ripped it up in the Georgia-Florida League under manager Earl Weaver. Bert was fourth in the league for batting average in only 80 games and 259 at-bats, hitting 10 home runs and leading the team in almost every statistical category his short time there. Not as short as his next stop, 17 games in Class C with the Aberdeen Pheasants, before jumping all the way up to Triple-A to play for the Vancouver Mounties. Nice way to end your first season, but most would say the teenager was brought along too quickly by Baltimore. A non-roster invitee for the second time in 1958, that's when Dad got Bert's autograph on that Oriole spring training scorecard I've shown that's covered with autographs. Mostly Cleveland Indians except for Bert, Barth, Joe Durham, and Larry Doby, who signed as Orioles. Dad also has a Giants scorecard from that spring training camp when they played the Orioles, with Bert listed in it. And I finally linked up Bert's name with his autograph, and at the same time I discovered another 19-year-old Orioles prospect on the Giants scorecard, Bert's Oriole teammate, who he played on with two other teams. Minor league pitching legend Steve Dalkowski, said to be the fastest pitcher ever not to throw in the majors. Bert didn't know it at the time, but as he was signing that Orioles scorecard for my dad, that might be the last time signing for a fan wearing a big league uniform. And he probably didn't realize it at the time, but besides all the All-Stars that he knew about and was putting his name next to, that some of those names would go on to become legends and Hall of Famers, with 3 being the first player from their country to play in the majors. Almost all the autographs on that spring training scorecard are from players who are historically significant to the game, and all are major leaguers, except Bert Barth. The big teenager that some said could be the next Babe Ruth wasn't. Didn't even make it to the majors, but in a way, his choice. No real consolation for Mr. Barth, but his autograph is on that scorecard and now linked with some MLB greats of the era. Bert Barth played for just 7 seasons on 14 teams in 8 different leagues between 1957 and 1963, with most of his short career spent in the Orioles organization. He did do some time with the A's, Tigers, Reds, and Twins in their farm systems, who all took their shot trying to figure out what to do with a big slugger who could also pitch. Bert's first 4 seasons, he bounced around a lot of teams and a lot of leagues, but his last 3 years, he would stay with each club all season. In 1961 with the Aberdeen Pheasants, Class C, where he thrived, no longer asked to pitch. Same in 1962 when he was brought up to Class B with the Rocky Mount Leafs, where Bert hit 33 home runs and 133 RBIs. Now, age 23, being brought through the system slower made a difference. But it was too late, because after a full season of Double-A ball with the Charlotte Hornets, Bert Barth retired at the age of 24, his choice. As you may or may not know, this show is about family and perseverance. One of the reasons I enjoy putting out these autograph shows about players who signed an autograph for my dad is so I can bring the player's name back into the light and maybe a relative will see his show. The thing is, my channel gets very little views, but on the plus side, most of my profiles show up in Google searches, which is great. I'm sure Bert's family members have a few stories about him they can tell, maybe from his birthday party a couple of months ago when he turned 87. I found a list that read like a scouting report of Orioles players from the 1950s who were expected to have great careers but didn't. It gave the supposed reason why they didn't make the majors, or if they did, why they didn't stick. Too bad for Bert, his name was on that list. Good for my show, though. I can always use insightful information on players. This is what it said about Bert Barth. Inability by the Orioles to decide whether he was a hitter or a pitcher. Injury and mechanics problems as a pitcher affected his hitting. Kind of cryptic, but you get the idea. His minor league pitching record was 15-10. As a batter, his average was .274, and in his 776 games played in the minors, Bert knocked out 130 home runs with these teams: Fitzgerald Orioles, Aberdeen Pheasants, Vancouver Mounties, Knoxville Smokies, Wilson Tobbs, Albany Senators, Amarillo Gold Sox, Fox City Foxes, Rocky Mount Leafs, and Charlotte Hornets. While on the Foxes, Bert played with MLB Hall of Famer Earl Weaver and MLB MVP Boog Powell, a couple of big names in Orioles history. But the name expected to make MLB history, but never did, was pitcher Steve Dalkowski, who Bert played with at that 1958 spring training camp, then later that season with the Smokies and the Wilson Tobbs. Both players were only 19 and in their second year. Bert played in 112 games for the Tobbs and led the team with 25 homers that season. And if you're wondering what the report was for Steve Dalkowski, the fastest pitcher some ever saw, said by more than a few, such as pitcher Sam McDowell and Ryan Dern, two of the fastest throwers ever, who, like Dalkowski, were heavy drinkers. In those days, you drank to be part of the team, even if you weren't a drinker. It was a social thing that builds camaraderie and was pretty much expected if you want to be part of the team and one of the boys. This is what the report said about Steve Dalkowski. Horrendous coaching. Mental block from a beaning in his third pro game. No attempt to have him repeat his mechanics. Extreme overuse. Alcoholism. I'd say as a teenage prospect with a bright future, any one of those critiques could derail a budding career. But put it all together and your chances of making the majors is not good, no matter how much talent you possess and might be harnessed. It's been said by more than a few that Orioles manager Paul Richards did more harm than good when it came to pitchers. Bert Barth and Steve Dalkowski were no exceptions. Neither made it to the majors when, really, they probably should have. Some who managed Bert said he shouldn't have been pitching at all, and his strong arm could have been used more effectively in the outfield. They didn't know what to do with Bert, and in the end, his powerful arm wound up being wasted. So on my way out, I will leave you with this. I came across a very long and comprehensive list of people killed at a baseball game since 1860 that were struck by a ball. Quite startling. Many dozens of players or fans that were either hit in the head, mouth, or heart by a ball that was almost always thrown and not hit. Not a very pleasant way to end today's episode, but it tied in perfectly with pitcher Steve Dalkowski and my favorite way to end any show, stories that involve Ted Williams. And I've got two. Both involve Steve Dalkowski and Ted. Actually, neither one is a story. The first is an observation from those at a spring training camp, and the other, a statement from Ted, and I've seen clips of Teddy Ballgame talking about both. It was observed that Ted walked over to the batting cage with bat in hand, where minor league phenom Steve Dalkowski was throwing. The young fireballer, infamous for a pitch so fast you can hear it but not always see it, with many of the pitches going nowhere near the plate, must have made old Ted curious and thought about taking a few pitches. They say when Ted got closer and heard the whiz of that fastball, the splendid splinter turned and walked away. But Ted would have to face Steve Dalkowski in an exhibition game not long after. That was the observation, now the statement from Ted. 4 words, really, that come from a 1970 Sports Illustrated article entitled The Wildest Fastball Ever. In that article, it was said that Steve Dalkowski is the only pitcher who could ever make the claim that he threw a fastball so hard that even the best hitter ever, Ted Williams, said he didn't see it.